Hi, I'm Paul Vallas. Thanks for tuning in today. What I'm presenting today is my comprehensive plan to address the city's long-term pension obligations without reducing benefits, to structurally balance the city's budget, and to permanently cap property taxes, as well as to freeze fees and fines. I've laid out a comprehensive plan that will do three things. The first thing is it will address our long-term pension funding obligations. Second, it will help us structurally balance our budgets and to reprioritize our budgets so that we can invest in the type of initiatives and programs that help our communities prosper and grow. And third, I want to cap local property taxes permanently and reduce fees and fines. Let's talk about the comprehensive financial plan. The biggest challenge we're facing today is how are we going to fund our pensions? We have to put close to $1 billion in additional revenue into our pension systems by 2023. This is a 4-year ramp up. It's in effect doubling our pension contributions. Now, we don't have to do that in a single year, but rather we have to ramp it up over a 4-year period. And the state statutorily sets the amount that we're supposed to put in. Well, given the fact that it's a 4-year ramp up, it gives us the ability to, in effect, ramp up the securing of the revenues needed to meet this pension obligation. Okay. So what I've done is I've laid out a comprehensive agenda that basically focuses on three things. The first is to have a legislative agenda that ensures that the city of Chicago receives its fair share of revenues. These are revenues the state has. These are revenues that we are entitled to. And most importantly, these are revenues that other local governments, counties and municipalities need to be sharing in. And the state revenues I'm referring to is first the local government distributed fund. The local government distributed fund distributes a portion of state income tax receipts to counties and municipalities. We're all supposed to get a share of the state income taxes. When those taxes go up, we're supposed to get a share of the increases. The last 2 times the income tax was raised, the legislature changed the formula or modified the formula so that local governments would not get their fair share. Well, I want to make sure that the local government share is protected. And if there's an increase in the income tax, I want to make sure that local governments get their fair share. That's first. Second is to eliminate the illegal diversion of the corporate personal property replacement tax. The corporate personal property replacement tax was a tax that was mandated by the state constitution to replace the abolished tax on personal property. And that money is supposed to go directly to counties, municipalities, and school districts. The state has been diverting about $300 million of that money from local governments to the state budget over the last 4 years. I want to end that illegal diversion. Ending that diversion alone would provide Chicago with $100 million. Let me point out that all the municipalities and counties and school districts lose money from the diverting of those revenues. And then the third thing is I want to continue to make progress towards getting the state to provide full equity in funding for teachers' retirement. Now, the state picks up the employer share of teachers' retirement downstate, both the old liability and the future liability, while the state only takes responsibility for future liability of the Chicago teachers' retirement system. The old liability is the employer share is borne by Chicago property taxpayers. I want to make progress, even if it's not in a single year and it's over multiple years. I want to make progress towards getting the state to provide full funding equity, the same funding equity that they provide for all the downstate systems. I want to make sure that we are equitably treated too. If those three things were accomplished, we would be able to secure half the money that we need to address the 4-year pension funding ramp up. In other words, we would have half the money, $500 million of the $1 billion that we need to remain on our schedule to ramp up our contributions so that we can ensure that over the next 40 years, pensions are going to be fully funded. Now, let me say that all three of these initiatives have three things in common. And those three things are what I refer to as my rules for taking initiatives to Springfield. Rule number one is you don't ask Springfield, you don't ask the legislature for things that you're not entitled to. When it comes to equity and funding for teachers, we're entitled to that. When it comes to getting our share of the local government distribution fund money, we're entitled to that. When you talk about ending the illegal diversion of corporate personal property replacement taxes, which is taking money away from local governments, well, we are entitled to that, number one. Number two, affordability. You don't ask for things that the state cannot afford. I'm not talking about a single year ramp up. I'm talking about a 4-year ramp up. And when you look at the size of the state's budget and the anticipated revenue growth, there's no reason why these initiatives can't be worked into the state budget. And the third thing, and most important, is you don't ask for things that other people are not already getting, or for that matter, are lobbying for. When it comes to fair funding for teacher pensions, well, the downstate teachers get treated one way, we get treated another way. We need equity. When it comes to the distribution of income tax revenues to local governments, the sharing income tax revenues with local governments, or for that matter, distributing the corporate personal property replacement tax revenues to local governments, well, those are revenues that go to all counties and all municipalities. And with respects to the corporate personal property replacement tax, some of those revenues actually go to the school districts too. So these are things that everyone's going to be lobbying for. These are things that are going to be part of every municipal and county legislative agenda. So this is a very reasonable, very responsible, very practical plan. And let me point out that with the fact that we have a new governor, that we have a Democratic elected governor, and that the Democrats have veto-proof majorities in the House and Senate, and that the Democratic leaders in the House and Senate are Chicagoans, are obviously longtime Chicagoans. There's no reason why this reasonable agenda can't be embraced and supported and implemented. And again, I'm not looking at doing this over a single year, but like the pension ramp up, I'm looking at getting this agenda enacted over a 4-year period. Now, with half the pension funding problem solved, let me point out that I've also laid out a contingency. See, what I haven't counted when it comes to revenues is I haven't counted money that might come if we are able to legalize casino gambling, sport betting, and gaming, the video pokers. If we are able to do that, that could generate over a 4-year period up to as much as $250 million. In other words, obviously, you would not see an immediate revenue impact, but you would see a ramp up. So there's no reason if we were not able to get those things enacted by the state over a 4-year period, we could see income from those sources ramped up to about $250 million or even more. Well, I'm not counting on that money. And the reason I'm not counting on that money is because I don't want to rely on unproven revenue sources. But that does provide a contingency. That's additional revenue that we would be able to secure that I am not counting on. So that's call it my legislative contingency plan or backup plan or supplemental plan. The beauty is if we get our state agenda, if we get the state agenda with the 3 items I've identified, and we happen to get the casino money, the gaming money, video poker money, we could then use that money for other things like neighborhood infrastructure improvement, lead removal, the lead pipe replacements, so that we can get lead out of our drinking water. We can help use it to promote affordable housing. There's any number of things that we could use that for. I'm also not counting on revenue from the legalization of cannabis. And again, if we get that money, that'll be supplemental money. If we get that money in addition to our other Springfield agenda items, that will be additional money that we could use for other things like reopening the mental health centers, or for that matter, providing adult occupational training, or going into those poor areas and providing expanded opioid and drug addiction treatment center funding, etc. So again, this plan is a very conservative plan because there are potential revenue sources that I am not counting on. Okay, so now let me explain what we're going to have to do from a budgetary standpoint to find the additional savings needed to fully fund our pensions. Now, in 1995, when I took over the Chicago Public Schools, we had a projected a 5-year structural deficit of $1.4 billion. You can look at the Better Government Association's story that they did on my discussion of my record at the Chicago Public Schools to see that that is their number, not my number, 1.4 billion. Yet 6 years later, when I left the Chicago Public Schools, the school district had six straight structurally balanced budgets, 70,000 more students, and 78 new school buildings and 350 renovated schools, 17% pay increase for teachers during that period of time, and a $400 million budget reserve. Total cash on hand and all its funds, close to $1 billion. The rating agencies, the bond rating agencies, also upgraded our bond rating 12 times, which is unprecedented. Now, how was I able to achieve that? Well, I was able to go in and to find significant efficiencies and savings into the overall budget so that I could then stabilize the budget, reprioritize how monies were being allocated, and then put programs in schools that help grow the district. The district actually saw an increase in student enrollment by 30,000. The only time in the last 5 decades that there has been enrollment increases in the Chicago Public Schools, those 6 years when I was CEO. So I can find 5, 6, 7% budget savings in any budget that is presented to me because I have done it historically. I've done it in Chicago, I've done it in Philadelphia, I did it in New Orleans, I did it in Bridgeport, Connecticut with the Bridgeport Public Schools. I have always been able to find efficiencies in the budget without closing schools, without increasing class sizes, etc. So you should have confidence that I will be able to secure the remaining monies that are needed in the budget without adversely impacting city programs, or for that matter, city employees. So let me tell you some of the things that I would do in the budget, or the areas that I would look for significant savings. First, workman's comp reform, pulling workman's comp out of the finance committee and realizing the savings that we should have realized decades ago had we simply removed it from the finance committee. I believe there's significant savings to be had there. Overtime. I mean, in the police department alone, the city's been spending anywhere from $50 million to $125 million more in overtime than they were spending when I was city budget director and I was staffing the police department at its full capacity. In other words, when I was filling all the vacancies and overall in the vacancies in the detectives division and the vacancies in the sergeant ranks, etc. So there is significant overtime savings to be had, significant overtime savings to be secured. The contractual services. I have always been able to find anywhere from 10 to 15% savings in contractual services by doing such things as renegotiating contracts, doing such things as strategic sourcing, standardization, by doing such things as doing more leasing as instead of going out and doing purchasing, and doing such things as working with existing contractors and in effect offering to extend their contracts conditional on the contractors themselves finding 5, 10, 15% savings. So the ability to secure significant contractual savings is there and it's just for the waiting. But I also think that there's other savings to be had. I think there's healthcare efficiencies we can find. And I'm not talking about reducing healthcare benefits. What I want to do is I want to restore retiree healthcare. But I think there's savings that can be secured by negotiating with our healthcare providers. I think we can get a better price. I think we can get a better deal in negotiating with our healthcare providers. I also think there's significant savings to be had through the more effective use of technology, through consolidations and reorganization, through more effective and efficient billing through the enterprise fund reimbursements. Reducing the city's expenditure base by 5%. And remember, we don't have to do it over a single year. we have to do it over a 4-year period. Well, let me tell you, I have the confidence that I can do it a single year, let alone 4 years. Doing it in a single year is not a tough chore. Doing it over a 4-year period is a piece of cake. I actually think we can realize even greater savings. So if we accomplish those things, if we accomplish our realistic, practical agenda that I'm going to present to Springfield, and that means mobilizing the city council around our state fair share legislative agenda, and then in turn getting the Chicago delegation to rally around that agenda. If we can accomplish that, and through reasonable budget actions, the type of budget actions that I have taken in other large institutions to realize significant savings, I think in combination we can meet our pension obligations. Now let me tell you, just as I did on my state agenda, there are some things that I'm going to be looking at doing that I have not counted in my revenue, on my list of potential revenues. Not counting on casino gaming and sports betting, and not counting on cannabis proceeds. Likewise, on the budget side, there's another initiative of which I am not counting on potential savings, but I want to have that initiative as a contingency. Well, I've laid out a plan on how to take advantage of expiring TIF revenues so that we can reap the revenue benefits right now. As you know, the mayor came out with this plan, or he talked about this proposal to issue a pension obligation bond. The theory being we are going to issue this pension obligation bond and we're going to invest these revenues in the pension funds, dramatically improving the unfunded liability, and then obviously reducing the annual city contributions to the pension fund, because the pension funds would immediately be healthier. Now, a problem that you have with those type of initiatives is you have to hope that your investment, that your return on investment will exceed the cost of the bonds themselves. And while that itself should be reason for people to be cautious, another problem with the plan was they wanted to dedicate the remaining flexible revenue that the city has at its disposal to, in effect, finance those pension obligation bonds. And I was adamantly against that because most of the city revenue is already locked away. It's already been securitized, or to put it in a simpler term, privatized. 93% of the city's property taxes that aren't going to TIFs go to fund the pensions currently. And all the city's new sales tax revenue has been securitized. It's dedicated. It's committed to the bonds that the city issues. So there wouldn't have been a lot of flexible revenue remaining to be used to secure these bonds. So I was reluctant to support the initiative for that reason. But if we can find a way to use expiring TIF revenues to windfalls that will be made available through expiring TIF revenues, and I'm not talking about all the TIF revenues, because some of those revenues are supposed to go to the county, some of those revenues are supposed to go to schools, but if we could use a portion of those revenues, we could, in effect, finance a pension obligation bond using the retiring TIF revenues. So that would give us a way to, substantially improving the financial condition of the pension systems, the pension funds, which in effect would potentially reduce the amount of money that we would have to place in the ramp-ups, because we would be dealing with a fund that was healthier. But again, I'm not counting on that because that's a contingency. That's a backup plan. If I cannot realize the savings and the efficiencies through the budget plan and my kind of spending and efficiency priorities that I've identified. So I think this is an extraordinarily solid plan with plenty of contingencies. And in the event we get our state fair share legislative agenda, and in the event that I'm able to get my modest cuts over the next 4 years, and we're able to get money from casino gaming and sports betting and gambling and cannabis, and should we elect to do at least a partial pension obligation bond, we will not only be able to aggressively solve our unfunded pension problem. We will also be able to have additional money that we can use for city infrastructure, for affordable housing, for investment in the restoration of community-based social services like mental health, etc. We'll be able to do a lot of things that will contribute to making the type of investments in the communities that will help improve the condition in the communities and will help those communities prosper and will help those communities grow. Now, I have already laid out a comprehensive plan on how I'm going to restore the police department and provide them with the support and the infrastructure they need to be effective. And I presented in detail each of the component parts and how I'm going to fund that plan. So at the end of the day, I think this puts us in a very good position to bring long-term financial stability to the city and allow us to begin moving forward, making the investments in the neighborhoods that we need to invest so that the city can begin to grow again. Our ability to secure our fair share agenda in Springfield and to achieve the base reductions in city expenditures that I anticipated will put us in a position where we will be able to permanently cap our property taxes so that they never increase by more than the rate of inflation or 5%, which means if you're a homeowner or you're a landlord or you're a business owner and the value of your property grows by 20 or 30 or 40%, if you're adversely being impacted by gentrification, you're never going to pay more than a 1 to 2% increase in any year. That's been the historic increases in inflation over the last 5 or 6 years. And it would also enable us to freeze our fees and fines and actually limit fines so that no one will pay a fine that would exceed the cost of the ticket or exceed the cost of the fee. Now, it would also enable us to eliminate the red light cameras and limit speed cameras to school zones or to areas where it's absolutely proven that those speed cameras are improving public safety. This is a comprehensive plan that can be implemented. There are contingencies in this plan that will allow us to generate even more revenue than anticipated. And the beauty of this plan is we will address our long-term pension obligations without breaking the promises that we made to our retirees, and we will be able to do it in a way that does not impose more draconian increases in property taxes, fees, and fines on working families in the city of Chicago. This plan can be implemented. These are the type of financial challenges that I have taken on in the past, both in Chicago and Philadelphia and New Orleans, after the city was devastated by Katrina. And every component part is something that's achievable, is something that's reasonable, and is something that's affordable. So I offer this as my comprehensive solution to addressing the underlying financial needs of the city and solving this pension problem once and for all. And I thank you for your patience and your willingness to tune in today. Thank you.